series. So yesterday we had started the biocultural adaptation of genetic and non-genetic factors. Here we were talking about how the man man adapts to various environments through the help of its biological adaptations as well as the cultural adaptations. That is why the term is biocultural adaptation, right? So we had started with, so in this we have to study about there are heat stresses, okay, there are temperatures. Obviously we are not going to talk about normal temperatures, right? Because normal temperature, which is something which is ambient to the homeostasis of a man, that means the temperature which a man can normally bear, we are not going to talk about the normal circumstances. The adaptation, whether biological or cultural, only is required when you be in a extreme kind of a situation, right? So हम extreme situations पढ़ेंगे. So we had started the heat stresses. That means any person who is living in extreme hot environment, what are the kind of biological changes or cultural changes that a man goes through. Then we are going to talk about cold stress. That means if a person is living in extreme cold, what is the biocultural adaptations. Then high altitude and so on. ठीक है ना? So yesterday we had already started the heat stress, and heat stress में we had already studied about the biological part. That means how through biology the man tries to do the adaptation. Now we are going to do the cultural adaptations in a heat or a heat stress. That means extreme hot climate में what are the cultural adaptations. And also we are going to sum up, because क्या है कि we are going to sum up the heat wala, and then when we study the cold one, cold stress today, we are going to usko we'll try to parallelly compare it with the hot stresses. So उससे क्या होगा, that will help you to understand and revise it better. ठीक है ना? So let's start with it. So cultural adaptations to heat. Now there is when you culturally adapt to the heat, what happens is that you're trying to change or create a microclimate or micro environment. Obviously that means the larger environment around you is something which is not up to what your body requires, right? So you try to make a microclimate within that climatic zone, right? That means, for example, गर्मी होती है, we switch on the AC. What is that? We try to reduce the temperature of the room, right? So that is what we are creating, a microclimate, right? That we are trying to create environmental conditions favorable, right? So that is what we do through cultural adaptations. ठीक है? So material culture such as habitations, clothing, ठीक है, establish a favorable microclimate, while behavioral adaptation center largely upon avoidance. Now what is it saying? Basically, if we talk about the culture, ठीक है, now in culture there are two things, material culture and non-material culture. Now non-material cultures are the ideational, so-called, you can say, the values, norms and beliefs. Now that is not going to help you fight from a cultural adaptation. Of course, if you are stuck up in a very hot environment, you might think, okay, I'm a very strong person, I am going to survive this. That is something else. But in a normal day-to-day routine, that is not going to help you. It is what is going to help you is a material culture. So all the food that we eat, what clothing we wear, what kind of houses we have, everything is determined by our culture. So that is what it is saying ki in the material culture, what kind of houses we have, clothing we have, that is largely that depends our adaptation to heat. And if we have to talk about non-material culture, only one thing is there, that is avoiding. That means if there is a hot afternoon, you might avoid going outside, right? That would be something, a behavioral change in you. That means if there is a loo kind of a situation, aapko lagega okay, let's not go now, let's go in the evening, right? So that is something that you do as a part of your behavioral adaptation. Okay. Now, houses are constructed of high heat capacity materials such as stones to delay entry of heat. That means क्या होता है? Basically, if you are making a house, the idea is that you have to create a home which is cool enough to reduce the temperature inside, right? So you will use those kind of materials that delay the entry of heat. That is first thing. These materials absorb large amount of heat before passing it into the interior, and stored heat is lost at night by radiation. ठीक है ना? Much like the normal thing that happens, obviously, जैसे for example the ground gets insulated, through insulation it gets heated in the day when there is solar radiation, and then when there is no solar radiation at night, it radiates back the heat. So the same thing is happening, same thing is it is saying we are going to use the materials that are more heat, that delay the entry of heat. Once if the heat comes in, they absorb the amount of heat before passing it. That means अब if this is the house, ठीक है, पहले तो इसने डिले करा, ठीक है, then it is absorbing the heat before passing it on inside, right? So inside pass on करने से पहले it has absorbed a lot of heat, ठीक है. By that time it will already be night time, ठीक है, and then it will start to radiate back to the earth. That means to the atmosphere, right? So this is how it is saying that we use the heat resistant materials in making of houses, so that heat temperature per se can be reduced. Okay. So if you talk about tribes like the Pueblo Indians, the Middle Eastern communities, they construct their houses several meters beneath the surface, as the mean temperature of the subsoil is more comfortable than the surface within the extreme variation. Now what is it saying? That it is saying, for example, this is the ground, okay? Now they are not making house here like this, they are not making the house like this. What they are doing is they are digging the earth, okay? What they are doing is they are digging it like this, and now they are making the house and whatever shape their house may be, because what they are saying is temperature here in the subsoil is much more comfortable, because obviously if the heat falls on the ground, it will take time to heat the different layers of the earth. So of course the more deeper you go, it will take more time to penetrate that deep, right? And that is why the temperature here is cold, okay? So isse a lot of temperature would be reduced. So this is one of the techniques. So you can see how the building materials, the kind of up community. Up now when you go to these Pueblo Indians, okay? Now when you go to a tribe like a Pueblo Indian or Middle Eastern tribes, when you will find houses that are made under the matlab or deep in the soil, that you will think, okay, maybe this is something different and this is part of their culture, right? And then there'll be 3-4 different kind of things that will be attached to this. For example, they might be doing certain rituals, they might be doing certain kind of offerings, and then it eventually becomes a part of the culture. Okay? So this is one thing, that housing material kaisa ho sakta hai, what kind of the behavior can there be. Okay? Then comes clothing. Now clothing also reduces abrasions, it prevents sunburn and reduces solar heat gain, right? So what are you trying to do? You are trying to wear clothes that are cool enough, that keep you cool and that help you to radiate the energy back, that not absorb energy in the clothes. For example, very simple example we take. So in summers we don't wear more of black, because black absorbs a lot of heat, then you feel a lot of heat, right? Whereas white pehante hai, so it makes us feel a lot comfortable, right? Because why it does not absorb that much of heat. That means the kind of clothing that we wear has also adaptation to the heat stresses or cold stresses, ठीक है ना. So it reduces the level of perspiration obviously, ठीक है, and maintain equilibrium also. जैसे for example if you wear something which is synthetic, right, then it will not help you perspire better, whereas a cotton cloth will help you perspire better, right. So these are certain clothing say the kind of perspiration, the kind of heat loss that you can do, ठीक है. It has been proposed that well acclimatized individuals wearing clothes perspire 30% less than unclothed men at rest, which reduces the heat load. So that means if you are acclimatized to a situation, ठीक है, and you wear certain kind of clothes, you perspire less. That means there is a kind of acclimatization that happens to that region, ठीक है ना. For example, if I go to a tropical region, ठीक है, I will start to sweat a lot more than maybe an average tropical person would do. That is because I have not acclimatized yet to the environment, whereas they have acclimatized to the environment. Now comes the Chamba Arabs. Tribal populations of Sahara wear clothing that minimizes heat gain, ठीक है ना. जैसे we were talking about cotton, you can wear cotton, you can wear light colored clothes and all of that, ठीक है. Then furthermore, a light colored external garment may reflect radiation, reducing the heat gain. We have talked about this. Now let us go to okay, let me just summarize this for you so that there is no doubt about this. So we talked about adaptation. Okay, let me change the color. Yep, adaptation to heat, ठीक है. What we did it in physiological or biological, you can say, as well as cultural, ठीक है. In cultural we said shelter or the kind of house habitation, you can say, then clothing and diet also, ठीक है. You eat fruits and vegetables, ठीक है, that keeps you hydrated, right, because there is so much of sweating that is happening and so all of that. So you eat the kind of food that gives you the right hydration. So obviously diet also matters and it is a part of your culture. That means in tropical regions you see people eat a lot of, not in tropical regions but anywhere where there is a lot of sweating that is happening, you should be hydrated, right. You should eat a lot of fruits. Now physiological mein we had talked about how the body senses the heat. So basically heat load is felt, ठीक है, heat load, we feel the heat load and it is by the you can say the thermoreceptors in our skin. That means if I, for example, if I touch a hot surface, ठीक है, the thermoreceptors in my skin would feel that and send and transmit that information to my brain, which will trigger the hypothalamus, ठीक है. उसके बाद what is going to happen, I am just drawing it in this way. Let me make it this like that, ठीक है ना, and let me change the color also. So when hypothalamus is triggered, so there are two things that are happening. One is the vasodilation, that means more blood sent to the periphery, right, to peripheral regions of the body. And then there is and you can say there is one more thing, that is increase in the heart rate. Heart rate also increases. So you can just remember this also. I am just telling you what all you have to write in this through a chart, ठीक है. So you can just remember this all. And when there is increase in the heart rate, basically our body starts to radiate, ठीक है, radiate heat. Our body starts to radiate heat through स्वेटिंग, ठीक है, स्वेटिंग स्टार्ट हो जाता है एंड आवर बॉडी स्टार्ट्स टू स्वेट एंड इवेपोरेट ऑल द हीट, ठीक है, एंड when vasodilation happens the same thing happens, ठीक है. So this all this both things, increase in the heart rate and vasodilation, ठीक है, causes increase in the blood flow, increase in the blood flow to the peripheral regions. We have talked about this. So basically only these things are happening, ठीक है ना. फिजियोलॉजिकल में दिस इज व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इन द बॉडी, ठीक है. इससे वी ट्राई टू रिड्यूस द हीट फ्रॉम द बॉडी, ठीक है. आई होप देर इज नो डाउट एंड ये अडेप्टेशन टू हीट में यू कैन जस्ट रिमेंबर दीज आर द ओनली थिंग्स दैट यू हैव टू रिमेंबर एंड देन यू हैव टू एक्सप्लेन इट. नाउ लेट्स गो टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट, दैट इज हाउ the next stress, that is a cold stress. That means how people adapt to the colder regions and what are the kind of adaptations that humans made to the colder regions. Again we are going to divide it in biological and cultural. Biological we will do today, cultural part we will do with tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to do high altitude and stresses related to high altitude, and the cultural aspect of how to adapt in a cold region we will do with that. Okay, so let's start. In colder regions, now we are going to parallelly study the heat one also, so that there is no confusion and you are able to learn it also. So now human physiological response to cold combines factors that increase the heat retention. उसमें क्या था, मैं ऐसे लिख देती हूँ hot एंड इसको फिर हम कंपेयर करते जाते हैं. आई एम जस्ट राइटिंग हॉट हियर एंड वी विल स्टार्ट टू पैरेलली you know compare also. So there we were trying to shed or we had to lose the heat. We had to lose the heat. Here we have to increase or produce heat. यहाँ पे in cold environments we have to produce heat and conserve heat, right? So objective is different. वहाँ पे we were losing heat and we were preventing our body from producing heat, ठीक है. Here we are producing heat and conserving the heat that is produced in the body. So first thing is this, when exposure to cold happens there is vasoconstriction. वहाँ पे there was vasodilation, that means blood was increased to the peripheral regions and to the body as such. Here vasoconstriction, that means we limit the flow of warm blood from core to the skin, thereby lowering the temperature. Now just understand, okay, basically I am saying that I have to, there is vasoconstriction. Now it is saying that we are reducing the heat to the body. Now you will say if blood flow or reduce heat कैसे हो गया, blood flow is reduced, basically blood flow is reduced to the peripheral regions. Now if we do this, now you will think how is this possible and how will this help in conserving heat. Just understand, if I tell you in a cold day or in a very, you can say in a winter day, you are drinking a cup of tea, okay, and it's a steaming hot tea, so the steam is also coming out, ठीक है, मतलब not like steaming hot but quite cold tea you are having, sorry, hot tea you are having, and this is your hand and this is your body, like that. Let me make it, and you are just sitting, chilling, enjoying your cup of tea, ठीक है. Now sometimes your hands are too cold, right? So what you do, you wrap your hands around the cup so that the heat is transferred from the cup to your hands. What is this? This is heat transfer. And you know till when the heat transfer is going to happen, till there is two contrasting temperature bodies meeting each other. Your hands are cold, okay, your hands are cold, tea is very hot, ठीक है, and now the exchange of transfer of heat will happen between the two till the time the temperature on both the sides become the same. So this is how it happens. So when vasoconstriction happens, you reduce the blood flow to your peripheral regions. That means your body becomes cold and the temperature outside is already cold. Okay? That means you now protect your body from exchanging any heat to the outer environment, thereby conserving heat. So you understand why is vasoconstriction important? And the opposite happens in the case of uh, in the hot regions. Their vasodilation is happening, the body is getting hot. Okay, then it is reduced because then your body is trying to maintain that kind of a temperature. So this is how the whole thing happens. I hope there is no doubt in here. So आपकी body ने it does vasoconstriction as opposed to the vasodilation that happens in the hot stresses. ठीक है? So आपकी body reduction of temperature gradient between the skin surface and the environment is reduced. ठीक है? That is one thing. So this is one thing that we have studied. Then sometimes what happens is now there is a deviation of the blood in the extremities from the superficial vein to the deep vein. That means body के जो upper veins हैं, that is superficial, that is close to the skin, वहाँ से deviation हो जाता है of the blood transfer to the deeper veins, so that your skin does not become very warm. ठीक है? Then in addition to this, subcutaneous fat layer provides an insulation. Now you see people in the colder regions, they have thicker layer of fat in their body, ठीक है, as compared to people who are tropical, or you can say people living in the cold hotter regions, because fat gives insulation or reduces the heat loss from the body. So that is the only objective, that is the objective also in our adaptation to cold. That means we have to conserve and reduce the heat loss, right? So fat is more in the people who live in the colder regions as an adaptation towards the colder climate. Okay? So you can see these are the Sherpas of Nepal. Okay? And then they are the Inuits of, or Inuits, and you can call them Eskimos also, of the Arctic. Okay? So these are just the pictures. Then we know, we had studied yesterday also the two rules, the two biological rules which are equally applicable to the heat as well as cold, because इसमें दोनों की बात की गई है. They talk about both of them, that is the Bergman rule and the Allen's rule. So Bergman rule क्या बोलता है? It says population and species of larger size are found in the colder regions. ठीक है? That means the body size increases in the colder regions. ठीक है? As compared to smaller size in the warmer regions. So this is the one thing that we had studied yesterday. And then Allen rule also says that you have the when you are in a colder region, the extremities, that means your hands, legs, ears, which are the peripheral parts of your body, they are shorter than in the hotter regions, precisely because you have to conserve the heat, and these peripheral regions of your body, they are easily you can say they easily exchange the heat. So you have to conserve your heat. So that is why your body is your extremities are not that long. Okay? So Allen and Bergman rule you have to remember. Then comes next part that we are studying. So when vasoregulatory mechanisms are not sufficient to counteract heat loss, the organism adjusts by increasing the rate of heat production. ठीक है? अब now this is अभी जो whatever we have studied, we have conserved heat. ठीक है? When this is not enough, when conserving heat is not enough, our body starts to produce heat. ठीक है ना? When there is more cold that you feel, your body also starts to produce heat. And how will you produce heat? You will produce heat via many involuntary actions you can say for example shivering. So shivering is when your body starts to involuntarily make a movement, and through that you try to increase the temperature of your body, because your body comes into work, ठीक है, so your body starts to generate heat. So that is one thing. Then people exposed to chronic cold maintain higher metabolic rate than those in living in the warmer regions. Now what is metabolism? Metabolism is basically the energy that we take from the food, ठीक है, that is converted to energy, and this energy is important for a living of of any organism, right? And this energy, when is converted from the food, gives us heat or produces heat, right? So if metabolic rate is higher, more heat is produced in the body. So the Eskimos and all, they have 13 to 45% higher metabolic rate than the non Eskimos or the non Inuits, ठीक है, that is another way. Then there is a very interesting thing that is found by the genetics also, that there are certain cold genes, ठीक है. For example, there are Eskimos, or when they are called Inuits now, ठीक है, these Inuits have certain cold genes which helps them to protect against the cold, ठीक है. So इससे क्या होता है, for example, if you take a tropical man and a person who's a Inuit, ठीक है, and you send them to the Arctic, and Inuits are as it is living in the Arctic, if you send a tropical person, he might have he will develop a lot of frost bites in a day, ठीक है, whereas Inuits will not. So one thing is, obviously he is not acclimatized, and after some times he might acclimatize to the environment, but even then their body will be prone to the frost bites, ठीक है. And if these, because the person is not acclimatized and he does not have those kind of genes that require, so you can say that genetics is also playing a part in protecting us from many kind of environmental stresses, right? So one of the adaptation or mutation that has happened is the cold gene, ठीक है, which is present in these tribes or these populations that are living in the colder regions. So I hope you have understood this. Okay, now body size तो हमने बात कर लिया कि body size also depends a lot. So if you have a larger body size, so we have talked about that in the Bergman rule, that larger body sizes are there in the colder regions, so more heat is produced in the body, right? So this is what isme you have to write the Ellen and Bergman rule. So if I have to just sum up the biological part, so I will just sum it up like that. Okay, adaptation to cold. So majorly it will be done in two parts, same physiological or biological, and also the cultural we will do tomorrow. In physiological we talk about, okay, in physiological basically what your body does, the same thing, your body will if the temperature is reduced, ठीक है, your body will feel that temperature through the thermoreceptors in the skin, ठीक है, will send the signals, and hypothalamus will be activated. Now this hypothalamus that is activated, what it is going to do is that first we have to, the idea is to reduce the blood flow, ठीक है ना, blood flow को reduce करना है, like we had increased the blood flow in the adaptation to heat. अब now reduce the blood flow कैसे होगा, vasoconstriction से हो जाएगा. There we were doing the vasodilation to increase the blood flow and reduce the heart rate. वहाँ पे we had increased the heart rate, right? So this is how you are going to conserve the heat. So idea क्या है, heat को conserve करना है, right? heat conserve हो जाती है. And here you can just add, there is a you can say cold genes का idea, ठीक है, that you can add here. Then Allen's Bergman rule, तो you have to add both the places, ठीक है. Then you can add the presence of subcutaneous fat, ठीक है, how fat gives insulation from the heat, ठीक है, that you can add. And apart from that you can add the idea of involuntary movements like shivering in generating heat, ठीक है ना. So now this has summed up the biological part of the topic, adaptations to colder environment. Tomorrow we are going to do the cultural part of it, and we are going to study the next stress, that is the high altitude, ठीक है. So I hope you have understood this, and I hope you have liked the lecture, guys. If you did, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you so much.